My name is Sarah Rahman. I'm a member of TPC and I help co-chair the Education Committee. I'm lucky to have Rosemary, also a TPC member, board member, and one of the superheroes on our grantee engagement team. She's my partner for this dialogue, and we are happy that you could join us. This is our May dialogue. It's about cities, food systems, and sustainability. We're lucky to have Orion from Boston Food Forest Coalition and Courtney from Mill City Grows. Before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. Please keep yourselves on mute. Please, at some time during the program, maybe turn on your camera, just wave a hi. I think we'll be a pretty small group, so it shouldn't be too overwhelming. And if at any point during the program, the quote formal part, not that anything is too formal, throw your questions into the chat. Rosemary, myself, and Carol, who is helping as a TPC fellow, and which is much appreciated, will be looking through the history. And we'll make sure your questions get answered. I think we have at least one or two people joining tonight who are new to TPC. So a teeny mini overview is that TPC is a women's giving collective. We're around 250, a little bit more, going strong. We come together with our financial resources, but with our time, interest, and curiosity to help nonprofits all over Massachusetts, largely Boston, through about the 495 Beltway. The biggest thing we do is we pool our resources together to give out grants. The goal is always around 10 grants per year, about $25,000 to each organization. But we also take time to learn about our organizations, talk to our organizations, visit our organizations, and volunteer with them. So today's dialogue is a part of the learning. We hope folks will take away what Orion and Courtney have to share about their work, about how they're impacting cities and helping with climate change solutions, but also what it's like to be a nonprofit right now. I, for one, recently saw survey results from Mass Inc. about nonprofits in Massachusetts. It can be a very challenging time, somewhat uncertain, unclear how to plan for the future. So the fact that Courtney and Orion are taking time out of their days right now to talk with us, we are very appreciative and grateful. I'm going to do a quick intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rosemary to do the Q&A portion of our panel. So Orion is the founding executive director of the Boston Food Forest Coalition. He built it along with his neighbors and community members and has incorporated it as a community land trust. It started in 2015. Prior to that, he worked with the TELUS Institute. He coordinated the Great Transition Initiative. It's an international network of scholars and activists that are examining the requirements for a transition to a sustainable planet. He lives in JP with his two daughters. Courtney is from Lowell. She moved there in 2020. And she wanted to work in an organization in her new hometown that did social justice work and education work. She has prior experience as a tutor, a teacher, a nonprofit vendor, and a public school administrator. She passionately believes that learning happens where people feel safe and accepted. She loves being part of Mill City Grows, and she loves the work she does creating such spaces across her city. Outside of work, she reads, advocates for her local library, wins at trivia, and walks her dog, which is a stubborn Chow Lab mix. So welcome, Orion and Courtney. Thank you for being TPC grantees. Rosemary, please take over.
Okay, and to start, just to again reiterate, thank you both for taking time out of, not only is it a busy time for all nonprofits, we were just talking in the room before we started, it's a particularly busy time if you are an organization who's rooted literally in the land and in growing and garden and sustainability. So it's an even bigger deal. So thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. I've got a handful of questions. We'll kind of go back and forth. I always encourage our presenters to also engage with each other as they would like. I'll reinforce, if you have questions during the first 20 minutes or so of this, or 30 minutes, throw them in the chat and we will get to them. And then when we get through sort of our formal part of this, We may be able to just open up that people can unmute and ask their own questions if the group stays reasonable. So I don't mean in behavior, I meant in size. I know you're all very reasonable as participants in this. But I thought it's always great to just have each organization just start off and really give us a better understanding of the work that your organization is engaged with and the wonderful things that you do and why it's important for us and why we should be so excited that you are TPC grantees. So I'm going to start with Courtney and Mill City Grows first, and then I'll try to balance who starts which one, if that's okay. So take it away, Courtney.
Awesome. I just want to thank all of you who are part of TPC. These connections are really important to us. So thank you for having me tonight and all you've done for Mill City Grows. So Mill City Grows is based in Lowell. We've been around about 15 years. I was just telling Orion, we started out with one community garden, and we've grown an awful lot. Our goal is to have access points to the food system for anyone who wants it in any way that they want it. So we think about that in terms of growing. So we have community gardens. We just built our 9th community garden in Lowell. So community gardens, if people want to grow for themselves. We have 2 farms in Lowell where we're growing food and we're giving space to other farmers to grow food. We are not certified organic, but we do all the organic things. It's hard to get certified. We want people to have access to food that's safe and healthy. And we also have school gardens. So I've kind of lost count of the school gardens, to be honest with you. We're either at 24 or 25, and there are 2 more to go in this year. We will have one in almost every school in Lowell, and that's so our kiddos can learn where food comes from, how to take care of it, how to access it. So we have all the growing spaces we can have. We also have markets. Our markets are situated in the neighborhoods of Lowell because we want folks who are accessing the HIP program, which I'd love to talk about. I feel like half my day is taken up every day of trying to get the HIP program back stronger. So it's a program in which people who have access to food stamps can use extra money, can use some of that money at farm stands, including ours. So we have farm stands all over the city. We have our newest acquired a piece of land, which TPC came out and helped us clean up earlier this year. We have bought a 22-acre farm, the last family farm in Lowell. We've saved from developers for a coalition between us, Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust, and Mass Audubon. So we're actually going to farm part of that land and conserve the back acreage. And we're really excited to see how farming and conservation work together. Those are sometimes 2 groups that don't see eye to eye, but we really do. So we're being very thoughtful about what we're doing on the property and the conservation that's happening on the property. And we're still raising funds to, clean out that property, have an education space on that property, and have a full-time farm stand. Yeah, so we have access points throughout Lowell. We want Lowellians to be healthy and happy, and be able to have fresh local food in whatever way they want. Yeah, I think that's the gist of it.
Thanks. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much it's grown in some ways in a relatively short period of time. That's not that long of a time. So
Yeah, I would credit that to Lowell. Like I think Lowell's a really thoughtful community that wants, it's open-minded and is interested in taking care of itself and its neighbors for sure. I would say that's a Lowell.
Yeah.
A Lowell thing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Orion, talk to us about Boston Food Forests.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here tonight with all of you. So thank you for inviting me. And also definitely all the support over the years has really made a difference. Boston Food Forest Coalition is a grassroots group of neighbors that really came together over a couple of years. Different people were doing different guerrilla gardening projects, taking over vacant lots and cleaning out the trash and the car parts and the hypodermic needles and the nip bottles, and then bringing in food for their community. So this was really a mutual aid effort that started with trying to make our neighborhood safer and trying to address the fact that, folks don't have access to fresh, healthy food. It's much harder to buy raspberries than it is to pick them in the local food forest next door. So that was the impetus. It was really different people across the city independently coming together with their neighbors, starting projects, and then those projects finding each other. And then realizing that if we didn't own the land, all this good work could easily be taken away from us. And so in 2015, I was able to step in as the unpaid executive director. And at that time, everything we were doing was a stone soup effort. People were literally taking their current bushes from their yard and dividing them or transplanting them and bringing them to the food forest. That was how things would happen. I was going into dumpsters and pulling cardboard out, so that we could lay it down on the ground and help restart the cycle of fertility in the soil. And so we had no budget, no staff, just a lot of real energy in the beginning. So truly people just wanting to see something happen. And we formed Boston Food Forest Coalition as a grassroots community land trust. So it's a 501c3 nonprofit that is set up to own the land. And so since that time in 2015, we have been steadily growing, and we are really growing very rapidly because Boston is experiencing simultaneously a lot of development pressure, and land is sort of and there's actually still a lot of land available, but it's not going to be available forever. Like we can see that it's getting gobbled up. And neighbors are concerned. So neighbors are increasingly concerned about the pace of development. They're concerned about access to fresh food. They're concerned about climate change and the future for our children and grandchildren, and don't want to feel passive about it. So people keep taking action. And then they find out about our coalition and they're like, oh, we heard about what you did in Mattapan. Can you come over to Charlestown and help us out? So through word of mouth, we have inReach now of close to 15 neighborhood organizations and groups that want to build a food forest. In June of this year, we'll be 10 years old, and we'll be opening our 11th and our 12th food forest. They'll both have their grand openings, which means all the construction is done and the trees are planted and everything's sparkly and shiny and new, which doesn't last forever. What you can see behind me is the Ellington Community Food Forest, which had its grand opening in 2019. And this picture was taken a few years later. And just to clarify what a food forest park is, it's not a community garden, although it can have, you can see in the picture, raised beds, and there's elements of community gardening happening. It also has park features like the gazebo. It has, this is a whole pollinator garden. Around the perimeter of Ellington is a bunch of fruit trees. You can't quite see everything. There's a sandbox right there for kids to play in. So it has elements of community use and community activation. So there's a lot of cultural events that happen every year. Ellington has a food as medicine event, which brings together a lot of different community stakeholders, and the community health van comes, and folks from other nonprofits are there, and they're sort of sharing, because they're concerned in their neighborhood about diabetes and asthma and other issues that are directly impacting their folks in their community. And so one of the things they wanted a medicinal mandala planted for each section of the body. So there's the respiratory section and the digestive section, and different herbs you can make teas with, which would directly help that. And so when it was all brand new in 2019, the herbs were in the right place. But of course, plants don't stay where you put them. They sort of move around. And so, and then it's all volunteer managed. So the same neighbors who convened the project, designed the food forest, set the goals for the food forest, formed the stewardship committee that takes care of the space and weeds out the invasives and decides what happens when the cherry tree doesn't live, and maybe we want to try planting something else. Whatever's going on, that's their ongoing programming. What sort of Easter egg hunts or birthday parties or other events should the neighborhood be hosting in the space? So it really becomes a neighborhood civic space, like a third space where people are connecting across all sorts of divisions of language and culture and race and class and age. People are finding each other in this food forest and forming relationships. And our understanding is that this is really community resilience. So we really see ourselves at the intersection of climate resilience and racial justice in Boston. We prioritize neighborhoods that have been historically redlined and have been disinvested in and don't have the same amount of tree canopy, parkland, have hotter average daytime temperatures. So we know trees planted thoughtfully in urban neighborhoods can reduce temperatures by up to 10 degrees. And we really see each of these food forest parks, which is open sun up to sundown, and everyone's welcome to use them. They're like patches of community resilience. And when you stitch them all together across the city, it becomes a quilt of climate resilience. And just last year, we've been recognized nationally and internationally as an exemplar of a nature-based solution of green infrastructure rooted in community. Like, we're ticking all the check boxes. You don't just plant a tree, you plant a tree in a social context where people are involved with it and caring for it. And the Boston Food Forest Coalition is the backbone. So we offer ongoing technical support, workshops, training, community organizing support. There's a maintenance fund. There's a volunteer access fund, because we know being a volunteer isn't the same for everybody. And so how do we get daycare and other things so people can really plug in and be a part of it? And so and also we're there like when key leaders retire or move away, and sometimes leadership implodes, we're there to make sure that the community isn't left alone in that process of rebuilding for the care and maintenance of the space. So these spaces are always welcoming, are always safe. That's our role. And we own the land, and we do all the behind the scenes work of insurance and land ownership to make it fun for the stewards to play with the plants and be there with their community, and they ultimately decide what happens with the harvest. And those same stewards so our board of directors is made up of a majority of stewards. That's our commitment as a community land trust. So there's an accountability mechanism in terms of the governance and land ownership structure. And definitely one of the confusing things for people is, what does it mean to own land collectively? Isn't ownership an individual enterprise? And so that's actually, it's been part of American culture since the founding, but it's a weaker muscle. In some ways, it's our democracy muscle, right? Like, it's gotten a little atrophied, and we're reminding people that we can do this together.
Thanks. So, I wanted to just kind of tie in. I know it again, this may be an obvious thing is to make the connection hit us over the head a little bit more about climate change and the role that each of your organizations play in that. And I asked this is an enlightened group always that come to these events, but I think sometimes we read the phrase climate change, at least I do, and sometimes it just feels like it's this very big macro thing. How do I even make a dent, that is just so overwhelming? And I just wondered if each of you could just speak to, make that little direct link. You already started to go there, Orion, about, and obviously not to limit what you do, because it's so much about community and resilience and equity and so many other things, but just kind of tie that connection a little bit for us between your organizations and climate change. Orion, do you want to finish up and then Courtney talk? Okay.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So we always say community resilience is climate resilience. Like, our ability to adapt and handle the changes that are coming depends on knowing each other. That's like the fundamental secret. If you look at emergency preparedness recommendations, it's all about like, bring your neighbor muffins now, right? Like, learn how many cats your neighbor's going to have to rescue. Figure out if everybody has somebody, like, you knock on their door if they don't, right? So it's all about knowing each other. That's like the fundamental foundation for our ability to adapt. And resilience is our ability to adapt to extreme changes. And we know that climate change is intensifying. So even as at the federal level, funding's being cut, the science is being denied, and all that's happening, doesn't stop the reality in our communities. And people absolutely are aware of that. They're feeling that every year. It's hotter in Boston. So I was saying, like, we're working in neighborhoods which have like 20% less parkland, 40% less tree canopy, and the average daytime temperature in Black and brown neighborhoods in Boston is 7.5 degrees higher than white neighborhoods, right? So you're talking about sort of unequal burdens of these impacts on our community. And so there's a real racial justice component to this work. So even though these things are no longer, you're not allowed to speak about them openly, they're still real and they're still here with us. And one of the things we're saying is we can come together. This can be a city that belongs to everyone. This is a multiracial, multi-generational coalition from the beginning. We don't have to wait for the federal government or the powers that be to solve our problems. We can act now to solve our problems. And so we move through that inertia of, oh my God, it's such a big global issue and it's overwhelming and I'm full of anxiety, into let's go plant a tree together. And then that has catalyzed so many ripple effects in the neighborhood and brought new people into climate leadership in the city. And like just moving into action is a very important thing. And I think literally the fact that this is a tangible project matters, and you can eat it and touch it and feel it and be a part of it and smell it. But it's also a symbolic project, and people resonate with these. This is seeds of hope we're planting. You know, the future is not someplace we're going to. The future is something that we create together through our choices. And so this is inviting us to be a part of that together. It's a window into it. You know, it doesn't in and of itself solve everything, but it does capture rainwater, reduce the urban heat island, sequester carbon, you know, it reduces stress and violence. So it's just this little, in a microcosm, has all these little holistic impacts. And if you do add it up, if you take, you know, every 4,000, 10,000 square foot piece of land, you're helping biodiversity and the regeneration of nature in the city. You're bringing people food, and you're planting seeds for the next generation, right? So the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, and we've been at it for 10 years.
Right. Courtney, do you want to pick up a little bit and kind of that
Sure.
same notion for Mill City Grows?
Yeah. Well, I think everything you said, Orion. I think we talk about very concrete things, like with the kids that we, talk to all the time. We talk about food miles all the time. So when you're buying food from us, the food, that we've grown has probably traveled like 5 to 10 miles between the farm to the market. And when we're buying from we try to aggregate as much food from within 20 miles from farms around us. So we're purchasing from about 40 small farmers. And when I say small, they're really small. It's like somebody and their brother. And so those are probably, like 20 to 30 miles. And they think that the average piece of produce in US supermarkets has traveled over 1,500 miles. And some people have estimated up to 2,500 miles. And so like the amount of energy that it takes to get something is huge. And when you think about the number of people who are kind of making those purchases, so we talk to kids about food miles and how far things travel and how we can get things closer. I always like to remind them too that when you grow food not to withstand over 1,000 miles in a truck, it tastes better because people are choosing it for its taste rather than for its ability to withstand, heat as it drives through the desert. So I think like that's something we talk about in a very concrete way. I think, I'm thinking a lot about what you said about space. Unfortunately, the only piece of land we own is this very new piece of land we've purchased as an organization. So we're on city-owned land for every community garden. Our big farm that we have farmed at for years is city-owned land. And of course, our school gardens are. And I truly believe that because we take care of them, because Mill City Grows is there, there's still parks and there's still farms. If we were to say we couldn't farm or manage a piece of property, I fear what would happen to that piece of property. And just like Orion said, we're so happy to own something. We're so happy to have a piece of land that we can say, this will never be touched. And we've made sure we've signed all the leases. There's nothing they can do to it. So I think that's really big. And I think what you said about community is so true. All of our programs exist to feed people, but they all exist to build community. And when we think about climate change, it's really, it's happened because of overconsumption. I think a lot of that has happened because we've lost each other. We're trying to fill gaps that used to be from your neighbors and your religious groups and your friends. And so I think like bringing community together and reminding us that we already have everything we need is really important. And I think the community gardens are a great access point for that, but our markets are a great access point for that. And all of our children's programming, people are coming together, and it's often over food, which I think is like such a beautiful human thing. A way to connect with people is to do it over food. And so I think bringing our community together and really saying, we have everything we need. We got this. We're doing it together is really powerful. Yeah. So I think, there's very concrete things like there's more trees because of both of our organizations and things like that. But I think you're right, Orion. It's about the community realizing they can help each other and be together and do for each other and don't have to, fill it in other ways. I think it's pretty remarkable.
I was going to take a step. There's a question in the chat that actually Sarah put in, and it's sort of relevant. It's sort of very specific, but could be a little bit big. We don't need to go too long on this, but for both of your organizations, as you work to transform the land that you, I'll say own, but have responsibility for, all right, in Courtney's thing, are you intentionally working in specific features that mitigate against some of the more frequent extreme weather experiences that we have? Drought, storms, flooding, heat, cold. Can you just speak briefly, either of you, about that?
Sure. I can jump in. I think we're
Sure, go ahead.
So in this new piece of property we have in Pawtucket, it floods often. It's been over tilled for probably over 100 years. And so we've built in a rain catchment system that will allow the rain to be caught before it gets to kind of the lower lying places, which by the way is where the farm is. So we're trying not to flood out the farm and we'll actually go into a pond that's there that we know is like doing a lot for the ecosystem. So that's one of the big ones. We're also putting in a food forest in our Pawtucket garden and putting in trees everywhere, native trees on that property as we can. So yeah, we're thinking about it. Also, our farmers are thinking about farming differently. So there's different, timing to the seasons, the length of things is longer just because the climate is so different. So I'm not a farmer, but I'm always fascinated when I hear like, oh yeah, we're going to plant this earlier, or that we had tomatoes coming out of the ground. Now these were in our greenhouse mid-November. I yelled at the farmer when I went to a farmer's market and I said, "How dare you buy these tomatoes? Like this is not the time. Like we shouldn't have tomatoes." And they said, "Yeah, they're still coming out of the ground." So yeah, I think things are changing a lot and figuring out like, how can we change with it in a way that maybe helps our folks? I think in terms of what we grow and when we grow it, it's definitely always on the table.
Okay. Ryan, how about, do you want to
Yeah, I
address
would say
that?
like what Courtney's saying is exactly right. Like a lot of the foundation is in the soil, right? So in cities we have dead dirt because of compaction, and dead dirt is more solid. It doesn't absorb as much water. It doesn't absorb carbon. So when you bring the dirt back to life and it becomes soil again, and you create air pockets, and you get the fungal matter in there and the good bacteria and the life covering the soil. The soil does not want to be bare. It wants to have roots in it. So all of that is the foundation. And then of course the trees themselves also sequester carbon, are also creating shade. You're creating an unpaved area, so you're capturing the rainwater, mitigating the rainwater runoff. And then we can do things like swales and other earth shaping mechanisms to sort of address how the water will move through the contours of the site. Also, the rainwater capture, a lot of our sites are not hooked up to city water, because specifically the neighbors wanted things to be independent. So they might have a solar panel. We have water catchment. The solar panel powers a pump. The pump brings the water to the highest point in the site. Then gravity brings it down through irrigation tubes, right? So that, as well as being sort of somewhat renewable, is another way that, we sort of are shaping the space for the future, for the world to come. Yeah, I think the other thing though is the educational component should be underscored as part of that, because there's conventional agriculture, which is the strawberries that travel too far, and then there's ecological agriculture, and there's this, or urban agroforestry, or it goes by a lot of different names, but a lot of people aren't aware of it. So those of us who care about this stuff, maybe we've read some of these words, but most people don't know. And I think it's important to remind people that we can feed the world this way. This is not, we do not have to have a form of agriculture that denudes the earth in the process of growing food for ourselves.
But I love the idea that we can feed the world this way. I have an ongoing argument with my significant other who, it's like, it all sounds very good, but how do you, monetize? Let's not go down that path. It's a whole nother years conversation. But anyway, I believe it. I believe if you did things small and intentionally, there's tremendous things we could do. I like the questions in the chat way better than some of the questions we had planned. So one of the ones that I'm reading now is Jenny actually put this in saying, you know, I'm so impressed with the range of impact of both of the organizations, from literally planting seeds to creating informed, resilient communities. As relatively small organizations, how do you manage your time and resources to do both? Obviously, it's not just your own individual time, but sort of the time of a limited number of people. So give us some insight as a small, dynamic organizations. Anyone can start.
I'm happy to jump in. We've always been a volunteer effort, right? So from the very, very beginning, it's people coming together because they care about their community and wanting to help out. And so that's that core. There's two aspects of that. One of that is like, it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. Like we're gonna do this because it matters, and so let's run with that. And it's about mutual aid. It's about taking care of each other. It's about these sort of core values, I think, rooted in American culture in many ways. And so that's critical, because I think one of the innovations of our model is showing, other urban areas. So there's a food forests that are happening in Norwood. I just was visiting the food forest that UMass Lowell planted. There's folks looking at a food forest out in Worcester. The Chattanooga Food Forest Coalition named themselves after the Boston Food Forest Coalition. And the model is that you don't need to hire a whole new parks department to manage these spaces, that people in cities especially want access to green open space. They want access to playing with the plants and growing their own food. This is a way that is a little different than a farm. We're not growing the food for money. It's different from a community garden. It's not all individualized family plots. This is a collective effort. And so actually more people can participate. And so our situation is we have more people knocking on our door and more volunteers saying, how do I get involved, than we truly have the capacity to respond to right now. So we need to hire more staff. We have a team of 10. Half our team is basically managing and supporting existing food forests, and half our team is designing and organizing and connecting with stakeholders on new food forests. And then we have a small number of us who work in the office and raise the money and keep the lights on. And yeah, it's not enough people, honestly. Like the one of the things that I think is important for us to think about is, like, it's not always about innovation. Sometimes it's just more of the good stuff. Like, we've shown this works. We've shown that people want this. We've shown that we can get it done, and we just need to show up and do it now. So our vision is to grow our team. We want to grow to be about a team of 20. We think at that size we'd be sustainable and be able to maintain an existing portfolio of food forests while steadily adding 3 a year. So our hope is that by 2030, we could have planted 30 food forests in Boston, but we wouldn't be done. We would just, be continuing from there. And we know the land is there. We know that there's hundreds of parcels that the city has already identified as not suitable for commercial or real estate development or affordable housing, and really is looking for good community purpose. And so that's hundreds of parcels. We're talking about doing 30 food forests. So right. It's not land that's the obstacle. It's not people power that's really the obstacle. But it does take coordination. It's a lot of every food forest is like exponentially more stakeholders. So that's where we need the staff to really help manage those relationships.
Yeah. Courtney, how about at Mill City Grows? How do you sort of manage that? What sounds like an enormous number of things that you have to keep track of. And I know your staff is not large, so.
No, in fact, Jenny, this question, how do you manage your time and resources? My answer was like, let's figure that out. I have to be honest. And so we're not growing. Like, we've made that decision. We get asked to do more gardens, more schools, more everything. And we do things. But we've kind of decided, like, our big project is this piece of land at the moment. We're not really taking on anything other than that. We're gonna be the best that we can at the things that we do now. We have an incredible staff, like the best staff in the business, I would say. And I have to say, we're a small nonprofit that can't pay them what I know they can get paid at other places. And so we think a lot about how do we be the best employer we can at this rate. So we give people more time off. We're very flexible about how things time works, when you come in, when you're not, you can be at home. I'm about to announce to them they get a whole nother week of vacation time. Like, so anything we can do to keep these people happy. Like, these are the engine, and they're so passionate, and they do want to work in this, in this kind of helping other people, serving other people, but it is hard, hard, hard work. And I'm never going to be able to pay them, like what a bank would pay them, or, where they could go and make more money. And so trying to make this like a sustainable place, both financially, don't get me wrong, like we're paying a living wage to everyone, but also, like, how can this be a place where you can take the time that you need, have time with your family, have a very livable life. I think is the only way we're going to keep these kind of like very engaged, eager folks in this work, because they can do it. I say this to my staff all the time, like, anyone would hire you. You're so good at what you're doing. So yeah, I think like keeping the people that are really doing the great work happy and engaged and not burnt out is a huge part of this kind of service work. Yeah.
One of the areas that I did have kind of as a question that was going to come up later, but it's also come up in the chat, is I know a lot of TPC members are asking themselves this question, which is, oh, we lose Orion somehow. Oh, well, he'll be back. I'm sure he'll be back.
I got back in the wrong spot, I think. Oh, here.
Oh,
Oh, thank God. There's just so much concern and worry among, not just TPC folks, the world. Like, what is it like operating today, in today's, what we're calling today's world, the government landscape, the funding landscape, particularly a lot of interest. Have there been any specific changes relative to immigration policy or ICE activity or public sentiment towards immigration? Have those started to have, or have they have some differing impact on either of your organizations? Kind of the current, I won't use the description of what the times are right now, sorry.
I think that the immigration issue, we've seen people not accessing our program. So there are folks we don't see at market anymore. There are folks we don't see come out to events anymore. We're part of a coalition in Lowell that's attempting to get information out to those of us who are doing a lot of work in the community, so we can be the folks who talk to our folks that are kind of scared right now, to tell them like where safe places are and that we're safe places. And we've talked with our staff about what that means. I think in terms of the other things, which I feel like maybe is federal funding. We were telling people forever, there's all these threats, but nothing is happening. And we have recently seen some losses due to the federal funding that we're very concerned about. And I'm just not sure how that's going to fall out. I'm hoping that, like most things, there's some kind of judgment and things come back. But yeah, we've definitely seen funding on the education side disappear. And one big grant that we were going after to do some farm building disappear. So we're seeing that happen. And I think what's happening, when I tell people like, how are you doing? We're fine. Everyone's just scared. So we spend most of our days walking around, calming down staff, clients, city councilors. Like, we just walk around calming everyone down, because sometimes nothing has happened and sometimes things happen and then go back right away. So I think like the biggest interruption for us has been just kind of like managing a lot of big emotions, all of which are relevant and important. But I also think that that's kind of the goal, is to get people off-centered, to make people feel scared, to make people feel uncertain. So I do think it's a big part of our job to kind of help mitigate some of that.
Okay. Orion, your thoughts on what's impact of the current situations, whether it's just immigration or in general, just government policies, funding, immigration changes. Have you seen an impact on either the involvement in your organization or programs or funding or all?
Yeah, I would agree with what Courtney is saying, that people are scared. We had a really powerful experience in February. We invited folks to have a Zoom call with the staff and the board and the stewards of the food forest, and 30 people on a Tuesday night, stayed for 3 hours listening to each other talk about their fear and share their experiences and their stories. And I think that was important. I think it's important that people know you're not alone. I think it's important that people know that our values haven't changed, that we're going to weather this storm and we're going to do this work and we're doing it together. And it always started with, those of us in our communities doing this work. And that's what's luckily, we're strong because of the strong local roots and the local support that we have. And we are experiencing budget cuts that are impacting us, both directly and indirectly. So indirectly, the city of Boston, some of the key city administrators that we work with are actually funded through the federal government, through community development block grants, through HUD, for example. And so their staff position is in jeopardy, and we need them to add capacity. We're ready to do more projects faster, and they're not moving fast enough from our point of view. So we want them to hire, not reduce size. So that's definitely stressful. And also, if we don't complete projects, some of our funders are like excited to see parkland in Boston be added because they understand the nature-based solution and the climate resilience aspect of this. They're paying us to build these parks, right? So that's their bottom line. So if we want them to fund us again for a second round, we have to complete the projects from the first round. So all the delays throw our whole sort of planning in jeopardy. I would say planning has been a major challenge. We had a whole, and I mean, we're still expanding and we're still planning to hire more staff, but part of what we saw was the TARP money, the IRA money, that was, we were good candidates for and we were aiming to get. And so when EPA cut its funding just recently to the Environmental Justice of New England program, that's a big blow to us in terms of our forward projections and growth. Another way that it's hurting us is the city of Boston is losing direct funding for food forests. So over the next 10 projects, we were counting on about $1 million in government money to help leverage private philanthropy into the projects. And so we have to make up that gap. So there's just, we see these big gaps in front of us for sure. And then, the tariffs and the inflation is also an issue because we have cost projections and we say a food forest, is going to cost us approximately X amount. We raise that amount of money and then all of a sudden, boom, costs have gone up, but the money is still the same money. So we have been talking with funders about that. And some funders have indicated a willingness to maybe meet us halfway or see what else they can do. But there's been no, it's still conversation basically. So we don't really know what's going to happen until it happens. And so we're nervous. It's definitely not going to stop us this year. We're in a position where we do have an operating reserve, which is a best practice for all nonprofits. And we've been able to sort of as we grow our staff, we have a real commitment that we don't lay people off, right? That we're really committed to paying people a livable wage in Boston. We know Boston's a very expensive city. We're committed to providing benefits, and we're committed to building a team that hangs together for a long time. And so we're not going to add people if we don't feel like we can keep people. But we need, as I'm saying, we need to grow. We need to grow because climate change is here. We need to grow because the neighborhoods are demanding more food for us, and we don't want to turn people away and say, sorry, we can't partner with you. We need to grow literally just because the work is important and there's just more of it to do. And one of the things in the chat I see, just to answer it, is how do we convince the city that a lot is better used as a food forest than sold and developed? So there's two parts to that. One is what I said earlier, the city has hundreds of vacant lots that it's gotten in a portfolio of property ownership that it doesn't really want to manage. It's not a property management organization. So it's looking for ways to get rid of those lots. So it's already done its own analysis and prioritized certain lots for affordable housing and commercial real estate development and is actively selling those off. But then it still has hundreds more, literally hundreds more that doesn't know what to do with. Has irregular putting stone, irregular zoning, doesn't have frontage to a sidewalk. So those spaces the city's excited to partner with us about because it doesn't have a lot of good community purpose. But the other part of this is we don't convince the city, it's the neighbors who convince the city. The city of Boston really does listen to neighbors who get organized and write letters and say, we want to park here and it can't all be concrete and no more $800,000 condos in our neighborhood, please. We need space for our children to play. The city listens. So if the neighbors organize and write those letters and petition the city will look at a space differently and does listen to the abutting neighbors. And so in that sense, Boston's doing a good job, I would say.